Do you have a starter kit for resin but don't know how to get started? Welcome to Resin Along with Steffy Jewels. You got a resin kit like what you see here on the screen. Well, today I will show you how to make a pendant using the two-part epoxy resin that came with your kit. Now, if your kit came with the UV resin, then click the card above or the link down below in the description, and I will show you how to make a pendant using the UV resin in your kit. But today, we're going to work on making a pendant using your two-part epoxy resin that came in your kit. Alright, so to get started with this, I'm going to go ahead and move out the UV resin because we're only going to be working with two-part epoxy. So I'm going to just move this off the screen. So we don't need to worry about this because in this video we're just going to do a pendant using two-part epoxy. Now if you have never used any two-part epoxy resin, then I will put a link down below or in the cards above to show you a video that I made on what the difference is between two-part epoxy and how to use it. Now I'm going to go ahead and keep these right here as well as these molds because you can actually put this embellishments inside your actual molds here. So I'm gonna go ahead and cover this up. We don't need to, we cannot, well, you probably can still use the two-part epoxy with these open bezels, but the thing about two-part epoxy is that it takes a couple of days to actually cure, and with this being open bezel, you have to really seal it pretty well so that way it doesn't seep through. So we're just gonna move y'all out the way, and I'm just gonna move this up. So the materials I have right here that you need for your two-part epoxy is, of course, you would need your gloves, you would need a mask, and some kits will actually give you a mask just like this, or I actually have one of these N95 masks, or a ventilator. You need to be in a well-ventilated room. Now currently I'm in a 10 by 10 extra bedroom. This is my craft space, and I do have my windows open as well as some incense blowing right behind me to kind of help mask some of the smell, because depending on how sensitive you are to certain chemicals, some of these epoxy resin might have a smell that you can't tolerate. But for me, like I always keep my mask on when I'm finna do anything. This one or this one, it doesn't bother me too much. I do use this more than I use this one. But yeah, just whatever your preference is. Or like I said, you can get you one of those little respiratory ventilators. Not sure if they even have any more out there because I know with COVID-19, they were kind of hard to find that mask, so they might be a little scarce to find. But you do need to cover up your face, I mean your nose and mouth, so you don't breathe into the chemicals, as well as protect your hands. So the stuff I have right here for my two-part epoxy, this is called Easy Cast epoxy resin, which is two parts. Most epoxy kits don't come with your actual resin. Some do. Now when I bought my kit, I actually got just the molds here. I have to actually buy these separately because I didn't see one I liked this one, so I started with this one, which is a two-part epoxy. The mixing is 2-to-1, which means you do actually I think it's 1-to-1 actually. Still it's 1-to-1 ratio, which means 1 part epoxy of the regular resin and then 1 part hardener, but you have to mix it twice. So once you put 1 and 1 into a mixing cup, you stir that up for, I think this is 3 minutes, and then you pour it into a different cup and you stir that for another 3 minutes. Which that reminds me, for a two-part epoxy, you also need mixing cups. Now I do have mixing cups right here that I bought separately. Some of them will give you these, some of them won't. Just like I said, it depends on what kit you have. So I will put some links down below on a couple of epoxy kits you can find on Amazon that you can purchase, you know, if you like. So here's my 2 cups here, and I have a bottle here. Now these dyes right here that you see as well are just strictly for epoxy, which means that it will mix well and it should cure without no problem. But just with anything, make sure you read the bottle and the directions, because some dyes are differently. You can also use I got these little resin dyes here, and these actually work for both epoxy and UV resin, like I said, and I'll put links to all the stuff below that I have here. So to get started, you need to make sure you get your mask and your gloves on and get ready to figure out exactly what you might want to do. So I'm gonna go ahead and move these out the way. And let's see, I think we're just gonna start for simple, for beginners. Just start with a simple mold. So I think I'm gonna start with one of these molds, just a simple square mold. So I don't really need these. I just kind of want to show you I got what came in the kits. Some of them come in there separately too. So, but for the sake of this video, I'm just going to show you a simple one. So, oh, and also some kits will actually come with stirrers too, which I forgot to mention that when I was showing another half of my video. So we're going to go ahead and start making a simple pendant. Now, I wanted to show you these molds real quick because these are both called silicone molds. So it's very flexible, easy to clean, easy to work with. I do have what is called a mold release spray here that you can spray prior to pouring your actual resin. And all this spray does is once you put your resin in here and it cures, it makes it easier to actually pop out the mold. Now, I haven't had any issue with this particular mold where I had to spray this. I think when I first started it, I did because I got it as a kit, so I went ahead and used it. But I never had to use it for any other my other epoxy resins. And I think I'm going to actually use this resin right here, which is KS Resin. I just bought this from KS Resin website, so I have never used this before. I wanted to go ahead and try this one for the video's sake because this is 1-to-1 ratio, meaning I just mix 1 part resin and 1 part hardening. Whereas, like I said, this one that I got here earlier, it's still 1-to-1, but you have to mix it twice. So after I mix it one time, I have to pour it into another cup and mix it again. It's called double mixing, and I don't like using that too much after I found out that it's easier to do 1-to-1. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my resin prepared and show you how I do it. Now, like I said, I do have a video on how to actually mix your resin. So if you want to see that, like I said, link it down below. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this prepared and mix this for you and show what we do next. Okay, so I prepared my work surface, which I forgot to mention that earlier in the video. When working with any type of resin, whether it's UV or epoxy, you want to prepare your work surface. Now, this surface right here, which you see right here on the camera, is actually a wood desk. So to protect it from having anything on it, I am working on a Teflon sheet. And basically what the Teflon sheet is that if anything, spills or I make a mess on it, it will not stick to this. So I have pieces here that's kind of stuck. It's like on here, but it flakes right back up. So you want to work on something like a silicone mat or a Teflon sheet. And like I said, all the stuff that I mentioned in this video, I will put descriptions down below, or you can purchase this stuff at. So I have my sheet prepared, so I don't want to mess up my actual work desk. Now, I got my mixing cups here because I'm going to work with KS Resin today. I have never used them before, so this is my first time using them. And one thing that you notice that you see me doing right now is I actually have the bottles inside some warm water, just regular tap water, because I want to make sure that I minimize as much bubbles as possible. Now, this is a trick that I think I've seen on a lot of YouTuber videos, or just, by playing around with it and just hearing everybody else mention it. But the warmer your bottles are, the easier it is to kind of mix them, and it won't have, like I said, little micro bubbles in it. Now, one thing too that I started to use is I actually have a room thermometer in my room, so I can see exactly how warm my room is. Right now is at 73.8 Fahrenheit, and it actually tells you the humidity, which is like 35 degrees right now. Now 36, so it's dry. And most resins, you have to work between, I think, 70 and 85 degrees. So, you want to keep your resin as warm as possible. So that's going to be like one tip right there that I can show you. Warm up your resin before you do it, about 5 minutes here. And then get your room thermometer. Like right now, it's at 74 degrees. And the reason why it's a little bit higher because I also, right beside me, or behind me actually, I have my space heater on too, so I can try to keep the area pretty warm. But like I said, once you actually within the 70 to 85, your resin should be just fine. So I have my mold here, and make sure your mold is fairly clean. There's no dust or anything in there. If not, just blow it out. Kind of wipe it. It should be really dry because resin does not work well with water. That's why make sure as well when you put these in water that your tops are on very tight, because you don't want to get any water in your resin. So I have my mold. I have my mixing cups in here, and I have these other extra little cups, which, by the way, all these are silicone, so if you want to work with any type of resin, work with silicone materials, because once anything dries on it, it just peels right off. So I got my silicone cups here to kind of mix the stuff I'm going to do. I'm going to work with these two flakes here, blue and silver, and then green and yellow, or green and gold. So I'm going to mix this in two of my molds here. And I got my actual stirrers. These stirrers too are actual silicone. And I actually bought some new ones too from Amazon just recently. These are actually silicone, so I'm going to probably use those as well. So let me go ahead and get safety first. So you want to always have gloves on when you work on anything. And you'll see a lot of people in videos who don't wear gloves. That is a personal preference, but just like with anything, safety does come first. So you want to make sure you protect your hands at all costs. I'm wearing some clothes that if something was to spill on it, it's not a big deal. So, but you want to have short sleeves if you do it. You don't want to have long sleeves so you don't get nothing on it. And I'm going to go ahead and put my N95 mask on. So before I do this, I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this, I'm going to mix 1 part of the resin to 1 part of the hardener, because this says 1-to-1 ratio, and then I'm going to stir it for 5 minutes. So it might be hard for you to hear that when I start putting the mask on. So let me go ahead and get the mask on. Okay, and like I said, I do have my windows open. I have my incense going. So let's get started. So I'm going to take one of these cups here. And actually, before I do this real quick, well, I can do that. I just don't want my gloves to get too wet, but that's why I have a towel here. So I got this. I'm just going to dry it out real quick. Really well. And yes, I kind of let that sit for about 5 minutes in that water. So you want to let it at least sit there for about 5 minutes to have time for your bottle to warm up. So that's in there. And then go ahead and dry this real quick. Because you don't want any water on it. I'm going to go ahead and move this in another part of my room so I don't accidentally spill it. Okay, so now that that one is ready to go, now let's start mixing. Now, you do want to keep you close by to a paper towel of some sort, because once you start pouring this resin out, you want to keep your top clean, especially on the hardener. And I can see I never opened it yet, so this is my first time using it, so I don't know how this is going to work, but we're going to find out. Okay, so 1 part resin, 1 part harden. Now, I'm not sure you can see them, but there's little lines on these cups here, and they're in milliliters. So when you're doing 1 part, it just means you're going to fill up to 1 part of the line, and then you're going to do it again to another one. So right here, if I do 1 part of the resin, I'm going to fill up to this line right here, and then another part of the harden up here, so that way there's 2 parts there. Because you don't want to mix too much resin when you're first starting out, because you don't want to waste as much. But if you do mix a lot, make sure you have enough molds to fill it out. So for the sake of the video, I'm going to just do 20 millimeters. So I'm going to get real close here. And like I said, I'm just going to pour till I get to that first line. Okay, there. So right now, I'm not sure you can see this, but I am right on that first line right there. Oh, I'm not sure you can see that. I'm on that first line. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe this top real quick. So yeah, just wipe it out with a paper towel or a baby wipe and close that back up. And close it as tight as you can. Now for shelf life, like most resins, like I know I use mostly art resins on all my projects, but a lot of them have, like this says, 6 months of shelf life once the bottle's open, or a year if not open. So, and here's the hardener now. So let me go ahead and put that in there. And I'm just going up 1 more tick. And it's very important that you follow the directions based on your resin. So if your resin says 1-to-1, make sure you do 1 part of the resin, 1 part of the harden. Oh, another thing too, it doesn't matter which one you put in first when it's 1-to-1. If it says 1-to-1 ratio, you can put the hardener in first and then the resin, or the resin under and then the hardener. It does not matter which one it is, but follow your directions based on your bottle, because if you don't mix it right, it will have an issue. Now I'm gonna go ahead and mix this for 3 minutes, because I think most of these bottles right here you mix for about 3 minutes, and I don't think third direction show how long it does on this bottle, but most of it's about 3 minutes. So I'm gonna do it for 3 to 5 minutes. I'm gonna go ahead and mix this real quick, but you want to mix it slowly. So just like this, you want to mix it slowly, making sure you get to the bottom of it, scraping the top. And like I said, this is all explained in another video called that I made, and I'll put the description down below for you to watch. So let me go ahead and mix it for 3 minutes, and I'll come right back and we'll start, pouring stuff into the molds. Okay guys, so I went ahead and mixed it, and I wanted to show you what happened when I mixed the first batch. I actually have 2 batches here. As you can see on the screen right now that I'm showing you, and yeah, I got this mask on still, so that's why I sound a little muffled. But as you can see on the screen right here, it has way too much bubbles in it after mixing it for 3 minutes slowly. One thing I didn't mention, like I said, I do have video for that, and I'd hate to repeat that, but yeah. I actually used a lighter here to kind of pop some of the bubbles. So when I did that, as you can see on the next picture I'm showing right now, that, yeah, it didn't really pop too much of it. So right now, this is where I'm at right here, and I don't know if you can see that or not. And let me take off one of these gloves so I don't get this on my camera. But on this right here, there's still a little bit of bubbles in there. There's a lot of bubbles, little micro bubbles in there. So I kind of let it sit on its own for about 5 minutes to see if something that will rise to the top so I can kind of pop something out. So it's a little micro bubbles. But here's my second one that I did, and it's not as much bubbles, and I'm not sure you can see that. It's not as much bubbles as the other one. So yeah, here's the first one I made. And you really can't see it on here. But if you were looking straight at it, you see a lot of micro bubbles, and there's not much here. So I went ahead and did another batch. Now, it's okay if you see a little bit of bubbles in there, depending on what you're going to mix it with. So with this batch right here, I'm going to actually mix it with some glitter or some type of micro powder or whatever. So that way I can kind of cover up as much bubbles. So let me take this one here. This is my new batch I made, because I want to let that sit for a while. And I'm going to pour some into these cups. Now, like I said, all these cups are silicone. So put a little bit there and a little bit here. And I'll probably have a lot of a lot of resin left over here. Now, this particular one has a working time of 45 minutes, which means I got 45 minutes before it starts to harden up on me. So, and I said, I still got some in there. So let me go ahead and, oops. As you can see, I basically almost poured that out on here, but luckily I'm on this Teflon sheet. So if I did pour it like just right here, once it dries up, it will actually peel right off. So that's why you want to make sure that you're working on a surface that, whether silicone or just Teflon sheet, where it can stick on it and it'll actually, get cleared out. So let me get, let's see, take one of my gloves off. I'm going to actually use some of this ink that I actually bought. So this right here is red. So we're just going to put little dots on it. So let me go ahead and put a little drop of dots here. So I'm going to start with one first, just to see how dark it looks. Oh, forgot, brand new bottle. Haven't even used it yet. So it came with these little things. So I'm going to pop this top here. Unfortunately, I'm a right-hand person, so that was not easy to do. Oh, shoot, I'm going to break the top. Live video at its best. Okay, so I think that actually popped this. So one drop here. Always start with one drop first, and then you can always add more to it. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this, and now putting my gloves back on because I don't want none of that stickiness to get on it. I'm gonna use one of my actual silicone stirrers here. So I can use this one right here. Okay, this is still silicone. I'm just gonna stir that up and just kind of see if that get rid of some of that bubbles. Actually, that stick is kind of big, so let's use a smaller stick. So, and you can use a toothpick or a popsicle stick to do this, or any type of stirrer, but silicone works better because if it sticks, you can just basically wait till it dries off and it peels right off, and it's just easier to clean. So that's just one drop. So yeah, there's still a lot of bubbles in it. Since I'm trying to make a pendant here, I want to try to cover up as much of those bubbles as I can. So I'm going to do another drop. I'm only going to add one drop at a time. And that's why I'm using the dark red, because maybe I can get the red to actually cover up the bubbles a little bit. And yeah, I'm just gonna mix it and mix it. And yeah, still look like I'm getting the bubbles here. So let's see if I can try to pop some of those out. Yeah, you just want to kind of put it right as close as you can on it. You know, like I said, this is silicone, so it won't melt your thing. And yeah, that kind of got out some of it. So let me add, let's see here, some glitter. I'm trying to find where my red is. To try to cover up. Well, you know what? We'll just go ahead and do this. So, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and just pour this in here. And like I said, I like the silicone because it basically just, you can just hold it like that and pour it out. So, there is that. And there you have it right there. That is basically making the pendant using just UV resin. So you're just gonna go ahead and stick this in here. And usually, like I said, when you leave this resin out, the gas, the little bubbles will kind of rise up because it's like gas. So you can pretty much pop it with a toothpick here. And I didn't fill that up to the top yet. So see if I have any more in here. But that's why I got plenty of more resin in here. I can actually make another one. So you can scoop it in there. Just try to fill up as you can to a top here, but that one actually ran out. So now let's go here and same thing. I'm gonna put 2 drops in here. Actually, we'll do 3. Let's do 4. Just to kind of get that a little bit thicker. So, like you see, you're just gonna mix it, and yeah, the more you get in it, the darker and richer your color gets. So yeah, just gonna stir this up pretty well. It's also best too to have a timer when you're working with resin. I don't have one because I kind of have a clock in front of me, so I know how long I actually been working with this, so I know how much time I have for epoxy resin. Now, epoxy resin is a very long process, so that's why I say if you're just starting out, it's best to start with your small projects first. So that way you can get through with it. But yeah, it is not a rush process. It pretty much is actually, you know, a slow process here. So the bigger your project is, or the more you got to do, the more time you have for it to cure. Now, this brand says it takes 12 hours dry to touch, and then it fully cures in like 3 days with 72 hours. So once you finish pouring your resin into your molds, you have to let it sit for 3 days. And that's the bad thing about when you use epoxy resin, that this is a long process. It is a 3-day process at least, maybe even more depending on what you put into your resin. And I actually filled that up way too much. So yes, you see I still got more in here, so I'm gonna go ahead and pour the rest into one of these. Go ahead and pour all that in there. And I was there. I only did one part one. I just went up to 20 millimeters, but you can see how much resin I actually got in here. So that one is through. I'm gonna try to scrape out as much as I can on here. And yes, I do realize I don't have my other glove on, but I'm basically trying to make sure that I'm not touching anything on here. And it looks like this resin is starting to get a little bit thick. So this first batch might have already been sitting out a little too long. So I'm going to go ahead and put my glove back on because I don't want to take the chance of touching anything in. Now let me just add some glitter. I'm just going to take some glitter here and just put a little bit in there. Now, glitter is a little bit different when you use this resin because it is a heavy material. So depending on what look you want, if you want it not to look like it's floating or you don't want to sink to the bottom, then you need to wait for your resin to be a little bit tacky. But in this case, I'm just basically making a little something here. Oh, and I'll put the top on this resin because this is very fine craft glitter resin, so you don't want that sucker to be falling all over your work session. So I'm just going to stir this up, and yeah, I use a toothpick to kind of stir that up. And see, with this right here, now that I had a mix, you're probably not going to see those micro bubbles anymore. So yeah, so if you have micro bubbles, don't trip about it. Don't worry about it. Just find something like a thicker paint or like say glitter, and then just pour it on it. Because then that way you don't see the bubbles. But yeah, so that basically right there is making pendants using your epoxy resin. Now, once you pour all your molds with your resin in there, then you have to let it sit for a little bit and see if you see any bubbles rise to the top. And then with a toothpick or with your lighter or a torch, but be careful when you use a torch. I do have one, but since this is a smaller project, I'm not going to use a torch for these. So that's what I use, just regular lighter. Or you can use a straw. I sometimes use straws to kind of blow out the bubbles. Just kind of pop it a little bit. Let's see. But yeah, you could just, use any of those things to kind of pop your bubbles out of here. But that's basically right there what you have just to make your first pendant pieces. So yeah, for epoxy resin, that is it right there. And you just take your little molds and you just made your very first pendant using a 2-part epoxy. So I'm going to go ahead and just do the other two real quick. And I'm going to come back and show you what I do with the next once I finish pouring my molds. So be right back. Okay guys, so as you can see, I finished going ahead and making my other molds here. I use, for the ink here, I use 1 drop of this resin craft dye in green in one of these little cups right here. And then I put a couple of these little gold foil flakes that came in one of my other kits, which is a UV resin kit. And I just kind of stir it in here, and then I just kind of poured it in there. And then for the blue one, I did the same thing. I used the blue one here, and then I put some of these in here as well. I think I did that one was the 2 colors. So once you pour it into mold, you're going to let it sit here for a while, kind of see if the bubbles pop up, rise up to the top, and then you can just basically use your toothpick and kind of pick them out, pop them, or you can use either your lighter, a torch, or just a straw, or just any type of, even your, just blow on the top of it, your air. So I can just take that mask off now, and I can just kind of like blow on it a little bit just to kind of see if I can get some of that out. But the longer it sits up here, a lot of that will start to rise up, the little bubbles. So like right there, you can see a little bubbles popping up. So I'm finna go ahead and see. Let me get my gloves back on, because I actually been touching that lighter with the gloves. So I'm gonna see if I can kind of pop some of these off. You want to get as close as you can and see it kind of pops the bubbles as close as soon as the flame hits close to it. So if you see any flames, the bubbles, just use your little lighter, kind of brush across from it. If you're using anything like a torch or anything, be careful because you don't want to burn your mold. So I do suggest, tip number 2 is to use one of these lighters or just regular hot air, because you don't want to burn your actual mold, and there's not enough flame coming out this lighter that's going to burn it. So see, I should put it right on top of it. Excuse me. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and keep an eye on it to see if there's any more bubbles that kind of rise to the top on it. But yeah, so I'm going to let this sit here and cure for about, I'm going to let it cure for 3 days. And you want it to cure fully before you actually take it out the mold. Now, sometimes with pigments, you might notice that your actual pendants will be a little bit bendy. It's just because you probably put too much of, ink or glitter in your actual resin. So you always start with a little bit to see how it works, especially if you're just starting out with resin. Like I put quite a few glitter in here, but I only did like 1 drop of the ink here, and I did, the thing that we do with 2 layers of a couple of drops of this actual dye right here. And since I had never used KS resin before, I'm not sure how it's going to work with this. So this is my first time using KS resin. So you actually get to see exactly, for my very first time user, how KS resin right now works. Because I'm used to using the Easy Cast one, as well as, let me show you real quick, Art Resin. I use, wrong one. I use the Art Resin. So these 2 brands I'm more familiar with. So I'm very interested to see what happens with the KS resin, because I heard that, for starters, as you can see on this bottle, this actually turned yellow on me. You can still use it. It's just going to make your resin not as clear as you saw with these 2 here. So I'm really curious to see that. Okay, how often, if this will actually turn yellow on me, because so far all my hardeners, even my Art Resin, had turned a little yellow, but it's still usable. I will still use it because most of my resin pieces, I always put something in it. So you're not going to really see the tint color of it. Now right here, if I would have used it here, you probably would have saw a little tint to it. But when I've been playing with the resin that had a little yellow, when you mix it, you don't really see much of it in there. So I'm gonna let this sit for about 3 days. You want to cover it up so that way no lint or dust will get on your pieces while it's still curing. And we'll come back and we'll see our very first pendants that we made using 2-part epoxy resin. So stay tuned with Resin Along with Steffy Jewels. See you in 3 days. Welcome back to Resin Along with Steffy Jewels. Now, I let my piece set for about 5 days, which is 2 extra days more than the 3 days that they recommend for wanting to get a hard cure. And one thing that I want y'all to see for the pendant a little bit, you can see this, is I'm actually have over my piece a clear top, or actually a clear bucket or something, so I can kind of see through it. And one thing you want to do with any 2-part epoxy is you want to make sure you keep it covered up until after it's cured. Now, once it's cured after 24 hours, you can take this top off, but I just kind of left it here and went around and did other stuff in my workshop. But the reason why you want this covered is that way if you have anything floating in the air, such as lint, dog hair, cat hair, just anything, it won't actually get into your actual resin piece while it's curing. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the top here. Put this over here beside me, and I'm going to bring this a little bit closer so you can see. So right now, as you can see, this is actually what we actually cured using our molds that came with our kits. So I'm going to go ahead and mold this. And right now, if you touch it, it is actually not sticky, nothing sticky. Well, that was kind of sticky, which usually means I probably put too much pigment. So anytime if you touch anything, if you feel it a little sticky, it means you probably add too much of your pigment or ink, which I probably did a little bit overboard here, but we're gonna go ahead and just unmold them and see what happens. So go ahead and mold this out, and yeah, right now I can see right now, which is I'm glad I'm showing this to you on the video. Even people who've done this for a long time, this sat actually for 4 days, and as you can see, it's still bendy actually, which means I added way too much coloring on this actual resin or in here. So let me try the other ones and see. It look like, yeah, all my pieces look like they're bending. Yeah, so yeah, all of these pieces are actually bending, which, like I said, I'm glad I'm showing this to you because it happens to the best of us here, and I've been doing resin for a little while now. So yeah, and see, it just bends pretty much when I take it out the actual piece here. So I'm gonna leave those here and try to get this one out. So yeah, see right there, it's like bending. Now, when you cure resin for 2-part epoxy, it's not supposed to bend like that. And I think the one thing too, I noticed that since I did use KS resin and I did not look online for the directions of how to actually mix this, since most UV resin come with a pamphlet in it, it actually said to mix it for 4 minutes, and I actually did 3 minutes. So I actually mixed it 1 minute less than it's supposed to be. So I'm gonna go ahead. Yeah, so it looks like all these are actually bending. So for me to fix these actual pieces, you know, that way for it to be hard if I wanted to do it, all I would have to do is put another layer of resin on here, whether it's a 2-part epoxy, or I can use my UV resin if you have some. So, but in a perfect world here, if you did this correctly, which in this case I did not do it correctly, so I'm gonna go ahead and show you this because, like I said, I've been doing resin for a while. Even the best people can make a mistake by not reading directions. And after I started mixing this, I realized I should have checked the KS website, KS Resin website, and find out exactly how long to mix this resin for. And after the fact, I found out, oh, it was 4 minutes. You do 2 minutes first, and then another 2 minutes after that. So, rule 1, always read your directions when it comes to mixing the resin you bought. Like I said, most of them will show you a pamphlet, others will have it on a website. But if you don't have a pamphlet, then check the manufacturer website and they'll show you how to do it. Rule number 2 is when you add colors, then to make sure you add a little at a time, because sometimes when you add anything into your resin, whether it's color, glitter, or anything like that, it will affect the dry time and curing time. But I think in this case right here, I think the reason why it is actually bendy is because I actually did not mix this correctly. So I'm going to actually make another video and show you how to fix resin that is bendy or sticky. So this came out perfectly because it's kind of hard to actually, you know, you know, create pieces and make it bendy on purpose. So in another video, you know, which I will actually show you how to do that. So if you want to actually see how I turn this bendy pieces into a cured hard glass-like video, then make sure you hit that like button, you hit that subscribe button, you hit that thumbs up button. That way you can actually see in live action how I take this little thing that's bending and actually make it into a hardened one. But I'm going to move this over here. And like I said, this one right here is a little sticky. So yeah, so now you're going to see how to fix a bendy piece as well as how to fix a piece that is sticky. So that, I'm going to just put that over here on the side. But let me show you some pieces that I've done properly on other pieces. See, that one's just sticking to my actual mat. So these pieces right here, I actually made, well, this one I actually made was UV resin, but it's still resin. But I made these pieces a while back using, I believe, art resin. And you can see right here, it is not bending. It's a brick. So if I take this, it still sounds like it's hard, but you can tell by touching it, it bends. So right here, this don't bend at all. This one does not bend. This don't bend, and this does. So when you mix your resin correctly, it should not be bending like the ones I made over here earlier in the video. So once again, that is how you will do it to make your very own pendants using 2-part epoxy resin. Now, like I said, in my next video, I will show you how to actually make the same pendants using UV resin. And then on another video, I'm going to show you how to actually fix resin that turned out bendy or sticky. So once again, this is your girl Stephanie with Steffy Jewels, and you have just watched Resin Along with Steffy Jewels. Make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that thumbs up button, that comment button. That way you can be notified on new videos when it comes to Resin Along with Steffy Jewels. Hope to see you soon. Bye.